better. Build back better. Blah, blah, blah. Build back better. We will build Babylon better. This time, a new world order. A new world order. A new world order. A new world order.
Okay, so in the past, we had been discovering. I was bringing a few different outlets, including The Atlantic. I'm bringing another one from The Atlantic because I have a problem and I just can't help myself. Regarding how America is not America anymore. Not just like it's not the America we used to know, but there are other countries that are better at being America. The American dream can be found, I forget what the example was, but it was like Ireland or something is better at the American dream than America is. And talking about the America's export being the American dream and how you should move out of America. If you love America, you should move out of America and go to Europe or something like that. And that was followed by a story that I actually don't think I brought to the show, but it was the punchline to that story, which was a record number of Americans are moving to Europe. And I believe there's a very effective social engineering campaign to convince Americans that other countries are more American and that they should move there. I don't know who or who would want that. I mean, as far as like whose agenda that is. But in any case, this is The Atlantic, and the headline is America is a Rich Death Trap.
Ooh, Death Trap.
Ooh. This is by Derek Thompson. I don't think we've read Derek Thompson before, but America is a rich death trap. And it goes like this. I'm going to give you a little summary and then I'll do some jumping around. Last week, the National Center for Health Statistics alerted Americans to 2 facts about life and death in the U.S. Are you ready for 2 facts about life and death from the National Center for Health Statistics? You know what? If they have statistics in the name, you know it's going to be a lie. If it has health in the name, you know that they're owned by Big Pharma. So let's see what they have to say. The first fact was sadly unsurprising. The coronavirus pandemic killed so many people that U.S. life expectancy fell from roughly 79 in 2019 to 76 in 2021, the largest 2-year decline in nearly a century. The drop was the sharpest among Native Americans and Alaska Natives, whose life expectancy fell to 65, close to the national average during World War II. So first, I'm not going to make a big point, just pointing out, they're saying so many people died in the U.S. of coronavirus that the life expectancy fell 3 years. Now,
especially with the Native Americans.
They're obviously
colonialists all over again, even in COVID.
Good point. Now, this is particularly grinded my gears because we know that the counting, the official counting of the death toll from coronavirus has lots of subtle complexities that make it a complicated number to decide.
Yes.
That is it. Objectively, a complicated number to count because of all the ins and outs of what goes into counting that number. There you go, Susan. See? It continues. Life expectancy is perhaps the most important statistic on the planet.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Yeah.
Whoa. Says who?
Synthesizing a country's specific scientific advances, policy errors, and social sins into a single number.
Oh, wow. That is, I want to know that calculation, that equation.
Isn't that beautiful? For such a sort of they're trying to convince us this is a very scientific process and it's very mathematical. And yet they describe it as a synthesizing a country's scientific advances, policy errors, and social sins.
How do you measure scientific advances?
Oh, how do you measure social sins? How do you measure any of those things?
How do you measure policy error? Okay.
The number is built on a weird hypothetical.
Oh, okay. Hypotheticals are always great and deeply grounded in scientific truths.
Yes, very important. Well, some of our most important crises are numbers that are built on weirdly hypothetical grounds,
Yes.
Climate change, other things. The formula for life expectancy says if Americans lived their entire life in 1 year, say 2021, repeating it over and over again, like an extended Groundhog Day experiment, how long would the typical person survive? It's a useful exercise for the purpose of capturing 1 year's conditions. Do you understand what they just said here?
I think so.
So
why even do this? Why do this? These mental gymnastics. They're basically putting the lifespan into a year and creating like a metric.
Yeah, so listen to this.
1 year.
Listen to it. When you say, the average lifespan or whatever, or life expectancy is 76, what they're saying is a person who is 70, say, in 2021, has 6 more years to live or whatever, on average. Because, and they've been alive since whatever that would be, 1950 something, 1950. Let's call it that. 54, technically. 5, dang it. It's if you lived the same year over and over and over, how long would you survive? So they're saying, like in 2021, the height of the pandemic, if you as one human being had to live that same year over and over and over, you could probably do it 76 times before you die. Isn't that a strange way to think about life expectancy of humans? It's almost entirely useless.
Completely useless. And they just say it's an experiment here. Groundhog.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Experiment.
It's a hypothetical. It's an experiment. It's a nothing burger.
Sure.
Let me continue. And let's see. But it imagines a life that nobody will ever live. It says right there. U.S. life expectancy will almost certainly surge in 2022 and beyond. Not only because the worst of the pandemic is over, but they can't say that's over. But also
the
because
worst of it is over, not the pandemic itself, just the worst of it.
But also because the disaster accelerated technology like mRNA vaccines that could raise life expectancy in future decades. mRNA vaccines, where now the expert advice coming from FDA, CDC, and others is that you need to get your booster 2 months after your primary dose and then repeatedly forever. That mRNA, the ones where the new Omicron variant vaccine is coming out soon. Everybody keep an eye out for it on your shelves. The second fact was perhaps more alarming. Okay, this is more alarming. The U.S. fared worse in life expectancy than other high-income countries. While most of the developed world saw conditions improve in the second year of the pandemic, more Americans died of COVID after the introduction of the vaccines than before their invention. Any explanation of yeah. And this is something we've heard.
Okay.
More Americans died of COVID after the vaccines than before their invention. Any explanation of this fact must begin with the American right's bizarre rejection of the vaccines. This is the bizarre, this rejection of the vaccines. During the Omicron wave, Americans were less likely to be vaccinated, less likely to be boosted, and significantly more likely to die of COVID than just about all pure nations. Notice how they don't actually give you a statistic there because
they linked to the New York Times. Omicron wave. Well, where does that take you? New York Times.
New York Times. Quote, people don't think of the blood pressure medication as a political act, but due to the misinformation from some media and elected leaders, Americans saw vaccines as a political statement rather than a health decision. No, they didn't. This is created by the media, says Joshua Sharfstein, a vice dean at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Yes.
The American mortality mystery clearly goes much deeper than the pandemic, clearly. The U.S. suffers from a raft of local epidemics that have turned America into the death trap of the wealthy world. America, death trap of the wealthy world. Let me see here. This one I'm going to read. Before the 1990s, average life expectancy in the U.S. was not much different than it was in Germany or the United Kingdom, as I've reported. But according to a paper comparing U.S. and European mortality, American babies are more likely to die before they turn 5. I immediately wondered if they added abortion into that, but they don't mention it. American teens are more likely to die before they turn 20, and American adults are more likely to die before they turn 65. Quote, Europe has better life outcomes than the United States across the board for white and black people in high poverty areas and low poverty areas, says Haynes Schwant, a Northwestern University economist and co-author of the paper. Despite our extraordinary wealth, innovation, and panoply of glittering appliances, Americans overall suffer from something like a lifelong death premium. Don't you love this? You're just gonna die.
Oh my gosh!
Americans are just gonna die more than everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay, one last one, and then I'm going to jump around just a bit. Okay. Some of the most immediate causes of America's high death rate are guns, drugs, and cars.
It will kill.
Wait,
guns, drugs,
and cars. Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like these are pretty cool reasons to have a high death rate. It's like a rap song, you know? Guns, drugs, and cars. They're all gonna kill me, but I'm so cool. The U.S. has more guns and gun violence than any other rich country. We have more drug overdose deaths than any other high-income country, both overall and on per capita basis. Notice how they didn't say overall and on per capita basis when it came to the gun comment.
Yeah.
Even before the pandemic, life expectancy in the U.S. declined for consecutive years in 2015 and 2016, largely because of the opioid epidemic and drug overdoses. So at this point in the article, you may have been under the impression that this lowering of our life expectancy in the U.S. was novel, that this was something new, that this was some big surprise. I mean, they literally said at the beginning, you might be surprised. Well, I was a little surprised until I found out the same thing happened like 5 years ago, 7 years ago, largely because of the opioid epidemic and drug overdoses. So again, because of Big Pharma. Thank you. The U.S. has a higher death rate from road accidents than Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union. Even on a per miles driven basis, the U.S. still has a higher death rate than much of Europe. Two things to point out here, and we are doing some serious deconstruction of the writing of this article, and it won't take much longer. Number one, they said, yeah, we have guns and people die of guns. Happens a lot in the U.S., more than other countries. Okay, but per capita and overall, we have more drug problems. And even on a per miles driven basis, the U.S. still has a larger death rate than much of Europe when it comes to cars and driving. So you see, they're digging deep into the statistics, and they are, what's the word? What's the word when you are doing statistics
Omitting?
And then, well, you're accounting for variables, you know. That is where How to Life with Statistics comes from, you know,
right?
Because you can say, whatever, the U.S. has more donuts than any other population, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing it per capita, that could be opposite. You might have more donuts in the Netherlands per capita than in the U.S.
Right.
So, you know, these little variables, these little, I'm seeing if somebody in the chat knows the official math term. They don't. Okay. So notice they really break it down on the driving and the drugs, but don't break it down on the guns at all.
Yeah, there's no example for the guns.
No example, no digging into the math like they do on the other ones. Now, I'm going to jump down. They talk about lack of housing a little bit and tie that into how housing further away from city centers causes more people to drive. So more people are driving, because they can't afford inner city housing. Again, kind of making a case for smart cities and urban living. So, you're going to die faster if you have to drive from a rural place
We're all going to die.
Yeah, or a suburb or something. Everybody should live in sky rises in the center of city, and then people stop dying of cars. And they go very deep into it. One pedometer analysis found they even go into pedometers, which is step counting. Americans barely take 5,000 steps, significantly fewer than residents of other countries in the study, including Australia, 9,695 steps, Switzerland, blah, 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 right? They're getting really deep into it. Then they go into, I'm jumping down to, then they talk about how we drive more, so we're more obese, and that's also killing us. And so they're adding obesity into car deaths. They go down.
We don't walk anywhere, but we eat. We still eat good.
Right. They go into
immigrants living longer.
Yeah, the immigrant thing was very interesting. Apparently, the people who live the longest in the world are immigrants who come to the U.S. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know why. They don't know why in this article either. But apparently, it's like on par with that Japanese island where everybody lives to be like 130 or whatever. Yeah. They're like, yeah, if you're an immigrant and you move to the U.S., you live longer than almost anybody on Earth. And it's because, I don't know, they just say, you're not born into the American death cycle, and you're more careful when you get here, and you get good health care. And so you live forever. But they don't add any explanation to that. So they talk about guns. They talk about the cars and all the variable ways that cars are killing us. They talk about drugs, and they talk about healthcare and drugs and the opioid pandemic, I guess it was epidemic. And especially, during the pandemic, more people died from drug overdoses than from COVID, stuff like that. But they never once do they revisit the topic of guns. They go so deep into the analysis of why cars are killing us, about how cars are making us fatter, and the cars are killing us in all sorts of unforeseen ways. And they're talking about drugs and primary care physicians and housing shortages and how that works in drug overdoses. And they're doing a lot of work to tell you why drugs and cars are having a negative effect. Not one single time after those opening paragraphs do they talk about guns. Not a single time. And I thought it was quite interesting. You would think that if they were that sort of excited to break down the math and the science as to all the different ways in America that you can be killed by our lifestyle, they did not take one single sentence to try to dig in to their claims about guns. Two options here. They are either just letting us, just make it up for ourselves, just put guns there at the top, or I don't know, maybe it's not as interesting. Maybe it doesn't play as big of a role as cars or drugs. And I think objectively, guns don't play as big of a role in death in the U.S. than cars or drugs do. It's like they threw it in at the very top so you could write the rest of the article for them. And so they wouldn't have to do it themselves.
Some kind of association. Look at all these other things. Do you find this strange at
all? Whoa. Is that a new sound effect we have?
It's a gun.
That's fun. That's your actual gun? You're actually shooting a gun.
Yes.
This is America after all. You can just... They call them desk. What do they call them? Desk shots.
Yeah.
Desk pops. What do they call them?
I don't know.
I forget. But do you think this is strange guns? Because I thought it was a little strange, especially in the context of trying to convince people to go live in other countries, to find the American Americanness in other countries. And part of it is also, there is no other country on earth, if you're into guns, there is no way to that's as good. Nobody is as American as America when it comes to guns. And that's something that we can all celebrate, I think.
Well, the thing they leave out is, they say that sentence, the U.S. has more guns and gun violence than any other rich country. Rich country is, an interesting way to put that too.
Yeah, right.
But also, it's a couple things to notice is that the other two things they focus on, the drug overdose and the cars and all that kind of stuff, those are all, the U.S. is responsible for the illegal, and maybe not outright, but the whole war on drugs and everything, that was all kind of a nonsensical thing where the U.S. is making a lot of money from the drug war, quote unquote, and creating that economy, the black market and everything. They're assisting in that. So the U.S. is responsible for that, for creating that. They're also responsible largely for the distribution of the cars and everything. And I don't even know that we don't even know if these facts are legitimately factual. They could be very much
they may be statistically accurate, but the problem is statistics and communicating statistics are two different things.
Yeah, and the other thing they don't mention is that because of the guns, like you mentioned, America does have certain freedoms that other countries don't, because there's
an implicit guarantee. Of certain
so it's
rights.
Interesting that they would be like, because of the guns, but all this stuff is killing you. So go to Europe where you don't need guns, or and any other country
or whatever.
Just
where
leave
they'll find
America.
it absolutely bizarre that any individual would even own a gun.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me, I think I've talked about my Australian buddies before. Made a couple Australian friends in 2019, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And they could not stop being entertained by my American accent. They thought my American accent was just the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's hilarious. What is so funny? Like, what do you like about it? It's so weird to me. And they're like, it sounds like you're going to kill someone. I was like, what?
That's really intense.
Yeah. So, and they're like, yeah, it sounds like you're going to kill someone. I mean, that's what all the movies they watch, all the, the American, the American export.
Yeah. The propaganda
of American
export.
culture. Right.
Yeah.
So they associate, much like how we might associate, an Australian accent with, I don't know, alligators or something.
Well, even just the 007 villains, like being Russians and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Russians are always villains.
Yeah.
The English are always tea sipping fancy lads or something. Although Jason Statham helped that out a little bit.
Yeah.
And Americans are just bloodthirsty killers. When they hear the accent, they're just like, oh yeah, this guy's going to kill somebody. I thought it was kind of fun. It was a fun way to be perceived.
Yeah.
So there you go. This is the Atlantic, their breakdown. Listen to this. This is the end of the article. America's unusually high mortality rate is our national shame. It ought to be our national obsession. They are straight up telling us we need to be obsessed with living longer. We need to be obsessed with this hypothetical, experimental statistic in which is based off of the idea that we live the same year over and over and over and over until we die. We need to be obsessed with this. First, we need to be shameful about it, and then we need to be obsessed with it. And you know where this leads? Being obsessed with your lifespan? Living forever, transhumanism,
that's where
cybernetics, uploading consciousness.
That's where I was going to land this too.
Low key programming for transhumanism.
Are you ready to become cyborg?